A single word has recently entered Bangladesh's public discourse and ignited widespread curiosity: subaltern. Following remarks by several Bangladeshi political leaders and scholars during a visit to the Oxford Union, the term has become the subject of renewed debate across media, social media, and intellectual circles. Some describe it as the politics of the oppressed, others see it as a defining idea of the global South. But what does subaltern actually mean, and is there a deeper intellectual tradition behind it? The word subaltern originally comes from military terminology, where it referred to a junior officer serving under higher-ranking superiors. Its political life, however, began in the early 20th century with the Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci. Imprisoned by the fascist regime, Gramsci deployed the phrase subaltern classes, partly as a way to evade government censorship. For him, the subaltern referred to social groups that existed outside the centers of political, economic, and cultural power. People who were not merely excluded from authority, but also largely shut out from shaping the dominant narratives of their societies. The concept gained international prominence in the 1980s through the work of historian Ranajit Guha and the Subaltern Studies Group. They posed a simple but profound question: whose perspective does history represent? Is it written through the eyes of colonial rulers, or through the voices of educated political elites? Guha and his colleagues argued that ordinary peasants, workers, indigenous communities, lower castes, and other marginalized groups played vital roles in shaping history, yet their experiences were largely absent from the historical record. History, they insisted, is not only the story of rulers, it is also the story of those whose voices have long been ignored. This approach became one of the most influential schools within post-colonial studies. The concept reached a truly global audience through literary theorist Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak and her landmark essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? Despite its title, the essay is not really about the act of speaking, it is about representation. Spivak argues that the greatest challenge facing subaltern groups is not simply poverty or oppression, but the fact that others constantly speak on their behalf: governments, political leaders, journalists, and academics. The more pressing question, she contends, is how rarely the people themselves are given the opportunity to represent their own experiences on their own terms. It is worth clarifying a common misconception. Subalternity is not simply another word for poverty or minority status. Not every poor person is a subaltern, and not every minority community qualifies as one either. Subalternity describes a structural condition in which people are excluded from meaningful participation in political power, representation, and the production of knowledge. Their experiences are interpreted and narrated by others, while their own voices remain largely absent from the institutions that shape public life. As scholars often summarize, subalternity is about exclusion from power, representation, and voice, not merely economic hardship. The concept later expanded into conversations about the global order. For decades, globalization was understood almost exclusively through the activities of powerful states, multinational corporations, and institutions such as the IMF, World Bank, and WTO. Portuguese sociologist Boaventura de Sousa Santos challenged this picture by arguing that globalization does not happen only from above. It can also emerge from below, through grassroots movements, indigenous communities, labor organizations, women's rights activists, and civil society networks across the global south that build international connections and influence global debates. Santos calls this subaltern globalization, or more simply, globalization from below. At its heart, the idea of subaltern globalization raises a set of fundamental challenges to how we think about knowledge and power. Whose knowledge counts? Whose voices are heard in global forums? Who defines democracy and who sets development priorities? Who writes history? The framework does not reject globalization outright. Rather, it challenges the assumption that only powerful countries and global institutions should determine the world's future, and insists that the experiences and knowledge of communities across the global south deserve equal recognition. The recent appearance of the word subaltern in Bangladesh's political and intellectual conversation is significant, though it calls for careful distinction between academic meaning and political rhetoric. In scholarship, subaltern is not a slogan nor the badge of any particular party or ideology. It is an analytical framework, a lens for asking who remains outside structures of power, who lacks meaningful representation, and whose voices continue to be absent from history, policy making, and public discourse. From Gramsci's subaltern classes to the Subaltern Studies group, from Spivak's challenge on representation to Santos's vision of globalization from below, the concept has evolved into one of the most influential frameworks in contemporary political and post-colonial thought. At its core, it presses us to ask, who holds power? Who writes history? Who claims to speak for others? And perhaps most importantly, do those who are constantly spoken about ever truly get the chance to speak for themselves? More than a century after Gramsci first gave the word its political meaning, the subaltern remains a vital idea for anyone grappling with democracy, justice, and global inequality.